Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across this world, great wide world of ours. Today I'm going to change a little bit, not necessarily talk about the BIA and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but talk about the American reservations themselves as a whole. And I've talked about this before in one of my books, Casinos and Diminishing Return of the Casinos, especially after post COVID-19, because this created the rise or the uh, availability of more um, of casinos, especially online betting, post COVID. And there's always this supply and demand, and and it's always we talk about that in economics, and then once you get to the saturation point, there's just not there's nothing you can do about it, and then that revenue just stays stable or goes down. And constantly, I see this with the reservations stuff on the gambling, because really, a lot of the ones that are more interested in the gambling is the boomers. Great generation. Most of them have pretty well died off. You've got the baby boomers coincide with the Gen X. But once those three generations pretty well end their existence, there's not this big need or want for gambling. So the situation though that's going to be created out of this is you're going to have a lot of these reservations needing money for social as well infrastructure projects, because with the gambling the issue became that they were able to use the gambling proceeds from that to better the lives of Native Americans on the reservations. And there's consequently a lot of people will say, well, there's misuse of funds on these reservations, and that I don't think is as rapid or as deep as it is, but there is a problem with that, because if you're in a trouble leader position, coincide there's a temptation to take the funds and help family members, and this is it's not necessarily a problem on all reservations, but there are some reservations where there seems to be a problem with this. And I think it tends to be few and far between considered the norm uh, over the long run. So, anyway, the point that I'm making about this is when the reservations became into power or came into existence. Remember, a lot of this occurred in the 1830s with the Indian Removal Act. Needless to say, especially in the Southeast with the five civilized tribes. And this mentality that, or by white European settlement to move Native Americans more west, especially west of the Mississippi, which coincides with my argument that since many of the tribes that exist west of the Mississippi, I think that it would be behoove that the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, be more of a centralized location rather than in a location on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., namely. But there again, I'm a big believer in, like myself, I get phone calls every now and then concerning will you donate to the police retirement fund, for instance? And you would say, oh, yeah, feel sorry for this, and it's a nonprofit organization. And what happens is 85% of those proceeds are anywhere from, I shouldn't say 85, but any proceeds from 70%, maybe even 65% of those proceeds go to administrative costs, and that's necessarily, as the old cliche, goes to the boots on the ground or helps the people that really are in need of the assistance. And that becomes, I was talking to somebody today about a lot of nonprofits that become so big that it becomes an issue, not an issue, but the issue becomes billing rather than helping the needs of the individuals. So there again, there's, like I said, with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and with the 12 divisions, the issue becomes, do we divide this up and more streamlined to help the tribes and get the needs to the people that are needed? And like I said, a lot of these tribes are not residential tribes, exist in isolated, barren areas, especially places like um, outer skirts of New Mexico, outer skirts of Arizona, where there's a tendency to be that they have to take in water, for instance, or have the luxury of driving an hour to go to a Walmart or to save a food lot or etc. to get a major markup. So it was the case in point myself when I moved to Tucson, Arizona, uh, finishing my PhD in psychology. I remember one time I asked somebody, at the time I was living east of Tucson in a city called Benson, in St. David area. I said, well, where do people go if they want to go out to a nice restaurant around here? And the guy told me El Paso, Texas. Well, El Paso was approximately 300 miles east of where I was at. And Tucson is really, at the time, was like a 30 miles, 35 miles west of where I was located at. So, in other words, they didn't consider Tucson as a modern city, but thought more of El Paso, Texas as the place to go. Needless to say, Phoenix would have been more of a convenient drive than, say, the drive to uh, El Paso. But that shows you the mentality that exists because, like like I've previously said before, a lot of these tribes are very isolated, and when the tribes are isolated, the communication is limited because of the fact that they have the basic necessities. They may have Wi-Fi, but since a lot of these people are below the poverty or near the poverty level, they don't have the comforts of such things as computers and etc. To they may have cable, they may have a dish to get TV channels because it's not the luxuries where when you live in a big city where you have the uh, electrical lines running near the city where they can help that. So it's this mentality by white Europeans that forced many of the Native Americans on these isolated areas, and many of these lands were not be able to be farmed. And the consequences of this that occurs is a lot of these people, especially when became under Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, even though he won the Civil War, he always had the issue of the Native American problem. In other words, the food and the constant harassment of tribal members harassing white European settlement. This especially occurred like in Arizona, New Mexico, when they were trying to settle the frontier. And the consequences of this as well was 1894, is the Wounded Knee and the Dawes Act of the 1890s, which forced a lot of children from, in which one of them was my grandmother, forced many of the children off the reservations into schools of Christianity so that they can lose their identity or the identity of their Native American culture. So there again, the consequences of all this leads to the mistrust, the misunderstanding, because pretty much from, and we could go all the way back to 1674. We talk about Kingsville War, which occurs in Massachusetts, Rhode Island area, where Native Americans riot against early parts of settlement. And like I said, at the time, the white Europeans had the better, even though they may have had not the outmatched or outnumbered by the Native Americans. They had the better weaponry and were able to subdue many of the Native American tribes. And the consequence, especially under King Philip War, was the servitude that occurred after that war, and which would lead to other understandings of what I used to be part of the European, especially English establishment, in dehumanizing civilization to make them feel that they are inferior and have no value at all. And consequently, this goes on through even we can go back to even we can go to Alexander the Great and other tribes. We can even go back to ancient Rome, where they believed the Roman Empire was the master of all, and when this occurred, they would dehumanize different parts, especially like the Gauls and etc. And this carries well into the formation of the United States as we know it today, because they dehumanized the African Americans and dehumanized the Native American population. And sometimes, like I said, with these reservations, I think a lot of people have a misnomer and a disunderstanding about what goes on in these reservations. There's a couple of movies out. One is called The Res, where the people feel more comfortable there because it's their identity and not necessarily what they feel is moving into a city there, which is important or not important. But the point that I make out of this, because, and I think this is where it's lost with the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, is that they don't really empower Native Americans. They more or less help them adapt to their situation and not necessarily create more self-autonomy. And I think that needs to be more looked into, because I think there's more agencies that, as I always like to say, blow smoke up their butt and not necessarily come up with the best solution to help people become more self-autonomized and more into a reservation that's led by chief leaders. Anyway, these are some food for thoughts. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Also, I have books available on Amazon. Recent one I wrote was Water Quality on the Reservation. The other one was Casinos and the Diminishing Return. Anyway, folks, feel free to email me and hope to talk to you soon. Thanks. Have a good day.